Okay, think about Aikido for a second. Guiding force, not resisting it, but sort of steering it.
Right, that redirection principle.
Exactly. Now, what if we applied that same idea not to a physical hit, but to, well, all the invisible stuff around us? Thoughts, feelings, the energy of places.
So that's where we get into psychic Aikido, applying that non-resistance to energy fields.
Precisely. And what's really interesting and what the sources you sent over focus on is taking this idea bigger.
Yeah, moving beyond just one-on-one interactions.
Right, engaging with whole regions, maybe even the planet's energy signature. It's a pretty expansive concept.
It really is, and that's where things get, well, complex, engaging remotely like that.
Absolutely. And that's our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To explore the potential challenges, the maybe hidden pitfalls when you're working with subtle energy remotely on that larger scale.
We want to unpack what the sources say, give you those aha moments without getting too bogged down in jargon.
Okay, so let's jump in. If someone's trying to tune into, say, the collective vibe of a city, what's one of the first big hurdles they might hit?
Well, a really common one, and it can hit fast, is what the sources call energetic overload.
Overload, okay.
Yeah, so when practitioners deliberately tune into these large fields groups, places, especially if there's a lot of, heavy history or unresolved stuff, they can kind of inadvertently become a conduit. They start processing that dense energy themselves.
Wow, okay, so it's like trying to personally filter the collective mood of a whole area. That sounds intense.
It is, and your own energetic system, well, it has limits, right? Constantly trying to transmute that heavy energy. It really drains your personal battery.
What does that look like? How does it manifest for the person?
The sources list some common symptoms, things like deep physical exhaustion, like way beyond just being tired.
Right.
Feeling unusually irritable, maybe snapping easily, trouble sleeping is a big one, insomnia that just doesn't shift, and even sort of a dulling of their own intuition. Their spiritual sensitivity gets fuzzy.
So it affects their abilities too.
Yes. And some sources even suggest that if this goes on long enough, it could potentially lead to psychosomatic issues, where that unprocessed energy starts impacting the physical body.
That really paints a picture. It makes sense why our sources talk about energetic hygiene. What does that actually involve? What are the practical steps?
Energetic hygiene is absolutely crucial, yeah. Grounding is foundational.
Grounding, okay.
Things like literally walking barefoot on the earthing it's often called, it helps discharge that excess energy.
Makes sense.
Saltwater baths are another powerful cleanser for the aura. Breath work, specific kinds, can help move stagnant energy out.
Right.
And visualization, like imagining roots going deep into the earth from your feet, that provides a really stable anchor.
Those sound pretty accessible, but what about building your energy back up after it's been drained?
Replenishment is just as vital. So regular meditation is key, helps you consciously bring in higher vibes, find your balance again. Okay. But sleep, proper sleep, is non-negotiable for repair on all levels. Sound healing can help realign things energetically.
Like singing bowls or tuning forks.
Exactly, those resonant frequencies. And just spending time in nature, that's a direct infusion of life force.
Simple but powerful.
And the sources make this really important point. You want to be a channel, consciously directing energy, not just a sponge soaking everything up indiscriminately.
Channel versus sponge. That's a great distinction.
It really is. Discernment about what you let into your field is essential.
Okay, shifting gears a little. Another challenge mentioned is, well, it sounds quite alarming, identity dissolution or ego inversion. What's that about?
Yeah, this one's a bit more subtle, maybe creeps up on you. It comes from that sustained contact with external energies, especially if your own grounding isn't super strong.
Okay.
When you're constantly interfacing with collective fields, the edges of your own identity, your personal energy signature can start to feel blurred, less defined, porous almost.
So that feeling of me gets kind of fuzzy.
Exactly, and the risk there is losing that solid sense of self. It gets hard to tell what's your thought, your feeling, versus what you're picking up from outside.
I can see how that would be disorienting.
Very. And the sources warn about this ego inversion, where it feels like your core identity structure is kind of collapsing under the weight of all these external inputs.
Wow.
It can show up as feeling depersonalized, really confused about who you are, or even feeling like you're being influenced by weird impulses that don't feel like you, especially if you're working with really emotionally charged fields.
That sounds like it could seriously impact your well-being. So
yeah.
How do you protect that sense of self, that spiritual sovereignty the sources mention?
It really comes down to consistent self awareness and intentional practices. Journaling is a big one.
Okay.
Regularly tracking your own inner world thoughts, feelings helps you spot what's yours and what's not. Mantra work, too.
Repeating specific sounds or phrases.
Yeah, it helps anchor your energy, reinforce your own unique frequency, and constantly asking for guidance from your higher self, your inner wisdom that strengthens your core connection and your boundaries.
So really actively tending to your inner state.
Absolutely. It's about remembering this work is empowered service,
Yeah.
not becoming some kind of psychic martyr.
Right, not losing yourself in the process. Okay, so what about when you're actively trying to shift these energies, not just perceive them? The sources mention potential retaliation from parasites or thought form entities. That sounds intense.
It does sound a bit sci-fi, doesn't it? But think of it in terms of energetic ecology.
Okay, ecology.
Within collective consciousness, strong, persistent patterns of thought and emotion can build up momentum. Sources talk about thought forms.
Like recurring negative beliefs in a community.
Exactly, and egregores, which are like collective thought forms that gain a kind of group life of their own. Then there's the idea of parasitic entities, energetic constructs that sort of feed off vitality.
Okay, so these aren't necessarily conscious beings, but energetic structures.
Precisely. Structures that have momentum and, in a sense, a drive to persist.
And they might push back if you try to dissolve or change the energy they thrive on.
That's the idea. If their food source or habitat is disrupted, they might react. It's seen as a threat. So they might try to reassert themselves or even lash out, often hitting the practitioner's weak spots.
How would that show up? What would someone experience?
It could be subtle or overt. Things like a sudden flood of self-doubt, really disturbing nightmares, feeling physically unwell for no clear reason, or even weird, destabilizing disruptions in your external life. Things just start going wrong.
Okay, so you need some energetic self-defense here, it sounds like. More than just good intentions.
Definitely. Proactive protection is key. Visual shielding is common, consciously creating a barrier of light or energy around yourself.
Visualizing a shield.
Right. Invoking spiritual allies or guides for support, depending on your path, regular cleansing like smudging or other aura cleaping methods to sweep away anything discordant you might have picked up.
Keeping your field clean.
Yeah. Some sources even mention psychic decoys or mirrors ways to deflect intrusive energy, but fundamentally the best defense is sharp inner awareness.
Knowing yourself.
Exactly. Knowing your own baseline energy really well so you can instantly tell this feels like me versus this feels foreign. That allows for early detection and response.
That makes sense. Know thyself, energetically speaking. Now, even if you're careful, things can get messy. The sources talk about karmic tangling. What's the risk there?
This is a really subtle but important one, especially when you're trying to help others energetically. Even with the best intentions, you might accidentally take on someone else's karmic stuff.
How does that happen?
It could be through too much empathy, wanting so badly to fix their pain, or just not having strong enough psychic boundaries. It's like stepping into their energetic story without realizing how heavy it is.
And what happens to the practitioner if they take on that karmic weight?
Well, it can show up in their own life. Maybe sudden, unexpected challenges pop up, or a persistent feeling of heaviness, sadness that isn't really theirs, or just feeling stuck, like their own spiritual growth stalls.
So it can really bog you down.
Yeah, accumulating that stuff that isn't yours can definitely impede your progress and cloud your clarity.
So those psychic boundaries we mentioned are critical here too. Any specific techniques the sources recommend for avoiding this tangling?
Absolutely. Setting and maintaining clear boundaries is vital. Affirmations can be powerful tools here.
Like what?
Things like stating clearly, only that which is in divine alignment may pass through me. Or, I return all energy that is not mine to its rightful source. Or, to the earth for composting. You're setting an energetic rule.
I like that, setting a rule for your energy field.
Exactly. And practices like cord cutting, visualizing severing unhealthy energetic ties, rituals for returning energy respectfully, working with symbols like the violet flame for transmutation can also help clear and prevent taking on what isn't yours.
Okay, proactive boundary setting. Now, thinking about the places themselves, can communities or environments actually resist energy work? The sources mention social or environmental resistance.
Yes, absolutely. Energy work isn't happening in a vacuum. People, groups, places, they all have their own energy, and it can be receptive or resistant, often unconsciously,
Hmm.
especially if the influence is remote and there's no explicit permission.
So, like an energetic immune system for a place or group?
That's a great way to put it. It has its own coherence.
How would a practitioner experience that resistance from afar?
It can be subtle, maybe sudden friction in your own relationships, projects stalling for no apparent reason, or just a weird feeling of being unwelcome, energetically pushed out of certain spaces, even online ones. In some cases, the collective energy of a whole area could sort of unconsciously band together to reject what feels like a foreign influence, even if the intent is good.
So it's not just about beaming energy out, it's an interaction.
It's totally an interaction. Respectful engagement is the key principle here. The sources really stress tuning in first, maybe even asking for energetic permission in some way.
How would you do that?
It could involve connecting with the spirit of a land, acknowledging the ancestors of that place, or just setting a clear intention for respectful interaction. Making offerings, prayer, or simply listening to the subtle energy before acting can make a huge difference.
Listening first.
Yeah, it comes back to that Aikido principle, honor the harmony. Be willing to back off or change your approach if your intuition senses strong resistance.
That makes a lot of sense. Respect is key. Now, what about the history embedded in a place? Geographic echoes and regional imprints. What does that mean for remote work?
Right, so this is the idea that places hold energy from their past. Big events, traumas, collective emotions, they leave an imprint, a kind of energetic signature or residue.
Like old battlefields or hospitals you mentioned.
Exactly. Or places with deep spiritual history like sacred sites. They carry that resonance.
So the place itself has a memory, energetically speaking.
You could say that. And when a practitioner connects remotely, they might tap into these imprints unexpectedly.
What would that feel like?
Sources describe things like sudden, strong emotional waves that feel out of place for the practitioner, intrusive images or memories that don't belong to them, or even vivid dreams connected to the location's past. It's like tuning into an old recording.
Wow, that could be really intense, maybe confusing. How do you handle that when you're working remotely?
It requires what the sources call localized attunement. It means doing your homework, researching the history of the place, understanding its story, its main energetic themes.
So context matters.
Immensely. Maybe invoking ancestral spirits or guardians connected to the land for guidance. Sometimes connecting with people from that area, locals who understand its deeper layers, can be invaluable for respectful engagement.
Collaboration.
Yes. And shifting perspective, sometimes the goal isn't to fix or dissolve these echoes, but simply to acknowledge them, to bear witness with compassion. Maybe that witnessing is the healing needed.
So it's not always about intervention. Sometimes it's about acknowledgement. That's a really key distinction. Okay, final challenge area, something crucial for any sustained practice. Lack of counterbalance. What's the risk here?
This is fundamental. If you're doing intense energetic work, especially extending yourself over distances, you absolutely need balance in your own life. Without solid grounding in your physical reality, without support systems, burnout is a real risk.
Oh, yeah.
Or emotional detachment, losing motivation, enthusiasm. It can be isolating work, this remote psychic Aikido, if you're not actively cultivating connection in your everyday life.
So you could end up feeling really disconnected yourself, even while trying to connect energetically elsewhere.
Precisely. If you don't have other practitioners, mentors, understanding friends, and you neglect regular self-care, it creates this inner vacuum. Doubts creep in, disillusionment, and that can lead to disconnecting not just from people, but maybe even from your own spiritual source, the very thing that fuels the practice.
That sounds like a downward spiral. So how do practitioners intentionally build that counterbalance?
It's about consciously creating structures for support and grounding. Things like joining spiritual circles, finding an accountability partner to talk things through with, scheduling regular retreats, or just focused self-care time.
Making space for yourself.
Yes, seeking mentorship is huge too. And maybe most importantly, consistent self-reflection.
Journaling again.
Journaling, divination, meditation, prayer, whatever works for you, to stay anchored to your why, aligned with your path, and tuned into your own needs.
Right, keeping your feet on the ground while your awareness reaches out. That makes total sense. So wrapping this up, it really sounds like this remote psychic Aikido is Well, it's deep work.
It really is. It demands a lot of skill, intuition, definitely humility, clarity, strong ethics. We've seen there are many layers of challenge, from overload to these subtle karmic or environmental things.
But hand of well, the potential seems significant too, for the practitioner's own development and for the collective fields they engage with.
Absolutely. When approached with preparation, discernment, and that willingness to keep learning and adapting, it can be profoundly transformative work. It feels increasingly relevant as we understand more about subtle energy.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you listening in. Even if you're not doing psychic Aikido formally, just think about your day to day life. What subtle energies might you be interacting with, influencing, or being influenced by, maybe without even realizing it, in your home, your workplace, your community?
It's a fascinating question to sit with.
Definitely something to ponder. And a perfect place to end our deep dive for today.